Throughout the civil rights movement, there was much pain, and the events that made the time period created it all. It started with a Supreme Court ruling called the Brown case, when the segregation of schools was ruled unconstitutional in 1954. That would lead to the killing of a small African American boy that would become the face of violence from white people in the civil rights movement. In 1955, Rosa Parks would refuse to give up her seat on the bus to a white man, and that would lead to the popularity of boycotts that were aimed toward putting segregated buses out of business. Although it worked, more was supposed to go right and went south. In 1957, 9 black children were blocked from entering a school, and it was the act of the governor of Arkansas himself. As students started sit-ins and more organizations were setting up and making a difference, protests led the 1960s. With those protests came police brutality that led to the March on Washington in 1963, when Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed to prohibit any discrimination of races. Then, in 1965, the March to Montgomery to improve voting rights showcased police brutality and violence, and it was named Bloody Sunday. That made the Civil Rights Act of 1965 be signed that improved the blacks' right to vote. To end the major time period of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, the face of the nonviolent civil rights movement, was murdered in 1968, and the Civil Rights Act was passed to prohibit the discrimination of sales and retail. The long fight was fought well, but it resulted in much loss.